Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so very much for joining me for this free masterclass on what I am calling the pillars of health. And I can't tell you how excited I am to present this topic because I think for a lot of people, those plateaus that we experience when we're trying to heal, right? We get to a certain point and things sort of flatline and we're not getting any better. And I really believe it's because these foundations, these basic building blocks of how our body works and how healing works are potentially not being addressed. And so, like I said, very, very excited to bring this topic to you. So for those who are not familiar with me, and this is your first time coming to one of my classes or experiencing my work, my name is Corinne Omland. I am a clinically trained herbalist working out of Kawartha Lakes, Ontario. I've got, oh gosh, far too many years of herbal education behind me because I never stop learning. That's something that's really important to me on this path. And I'll often joke with my students, if you meet a herbalist that says they know everything, to turn around and run, because you're never done. You're never really ever done learning. And so I run a herbal clinic. I teach on a regular basis. I have a YouTube channel. If you haven't found me on YouTube, make sure you head on over there because I have lots of great free content. And I just hit 10,000 subscribers too on YouTube, which was pretty darn exciting. So I imagine when I say these following words, like let me know in the chat or give me a hands up if this is you, but a lot of us have been on this healing journey for a really long time, like a lot longer than we were sort of hoping that it would take. You know, we've spent time, we've spent money, and it feels like we're getting nowhere. And one of my teachers said it perfectly once. She's like, humans are on a revolution, not an evolution. We tend to find ourselves in these cycles and circles that we can't get out of. And it got me thinking, is it possible that there's a foundational aspect of health that maybe we just weren't taught, we weren't told about, and we therefore don't understand? So the current challenge that can be raised with the allopathic model. And so when I say allopathic model, I do tend to mean more physician-based care, but that's not always the case. Herbalists, naturopaths can kind of heal in this framework as well. We tend to just treat symptoms. And so I've got acne, here, take Accutane. I'm sad, here, take St. John's wort. Okay, can't sleep, well, we've got sedatives for you. And so we tend to approach things from a really symptomatic point of view. But if we aren't addressing the basic foundations of health and healing journey, we can only get so far. We eventually plateau. The second issue I've seen with healing, and again, let me know in the chat if you feel this way too, or if this resonates, is we've often outsourced a lot of our healing potential to other people, to experts. And how often have you been to an appointment with someone and you feel disregarded, unheard? You know, you leave and they're like, I don't even think they really understood what I was trying to say. It was like they knew what was going on in my body better than I knew. And I mean, that couldn't be further from the case, right? Like we spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 inside our bodies. We know what's going on, usually better than the person that we're going to see. And a lot of times I will hear this story of like, I just wasn't heard. I just wasn't heard. Or even worse, there are certain conditions that people struggle with, things like fibromyalgia. The number of times my clients have said it's all in your head. Like I couldn't imagine how disempowering that can be. And I feel if we had the right keys and understood the system, that this wouldn't really happen. So the first issue, one of the main issues to sum up what the challenge with this sort of paradigm of the way that we treat the body symptomatically is, one, we're treated like just a list of symptoms as opposed to an actual human being, which is what we are. And we're compartmentalized. And so where does the soul come in? Where does your emotional and mental well-being come in? How do we address all of these? And how do we not leave appointments or healing sessions or our own treatments that we've tried to do feeling powerless and lost? And so I feel like for a lot of people, we're on this journey of healing, but we don't have a map. So my hope tonight is that I'm going to share my map with you. Now, I want you to take this information, and if it works for you, fly. And if it doesn't, that's okay too. This is just how I perceive things. I don't expect you to take what I'm saying as gospel, right? I don't want to disempower you. I want you to take this knowledge and integrate it the best way that you can and what works best for you. So we're going to be talking about, again, what I have coined the foundations of health, or the pillars of health. I'm just having some elderberry syrup. 'Tis the season. I talk about this as akin to the foundation of your home. Okay, you can have the best floors, high-end appliances, highest quality furniture, but if the actual foundation of your home is crumbling, then it doesn't matter what you have inside of it. And so addressing those foundation parts, and here's the thing, the urge is to skip this part because it's boring. It's less than sexy. I don't want to talk about the foundation stuff. I want to get right to the symptoms, because this is how we've been trained to think. We also tend to live in a little bit of an instant gratification world. And so when we don't get alleviation of symptoms right away, we think something's wrong on our healing journey. And so I think we have to remember that true healing takes time. There is no, I mean, how many healers out there are selling programs, lose weight in 5 weeks following my program, feel better in 4 weeks following my program. They're akin to these get rich quick schemes, right? And again, it doesn't really work. So I kind of want to drop this bit of information into your knowing, into your field, as I like to say, and kind of bounce it around. It took time for any dis-ease or imbalance or lack of harmony in your body to build. I want you to remember that physical manifestation of symptoms is actually one of the last things that happen. By the time your body is expressing symptoms, there were underlying issues going on beneath the surface that you might not have known on for years, potentially. And oftentimes these things start with a lack of alignment, then that builds up to inflammation, and then eventually we have a manifestation of symptoms. And so we have to give ourselves the space and grace that's necessary, because if it took time to get to the dis-ease state, it may take time to get to the healing state, and to allow that and to have space for it. However, also practice discernment, because if what you're doing really isn't working, then that's okay too, right? So it's kind of just having, so first, we don't want to expect overnight miracles, because they almost never really do happen. And just have that, like I said, that space and grace for things to take time. So the first pillar of health I want to talk about is digestion, or what we refer to as assimilation. And there's quite a few weavers here tonight, so you guys have heard me say this before, and I'm going to say it again. You know that saying, you are what you eat? It's not quite right. You are what you assimilate. I want you to think about that, okay? Because you can be eating the highest quality food, taking the best supplements, you're taking your collagen powders and your fancy fish oils and your probiotics, and you're eating non-GMO organic food from a farm down the road. But if your body can't digest it, it doesn't matter. And that's the worst part about it. This is why we have to treat digestion first. So for completeness sake, when I say assimilation, what I'm talking about is the body's ability to absorb oxygen, water, and nutrients. So all three of those things need to be working well for your body to assimilate what it needs for its basic function. And then we also talk about how all these things are actually absorbed into the cells. So remember, the chat box is open. If you've got questions, drop it in there. For simplicity's sake, we're mostly just going to tackle the greatest impact on health and healing, and that would be digestion. And so in order to properly assimilate your food has to be broken down into the smallest individual units. So for proteins, those are amino acids. In order for your body to assimilate protein, it needs to be able to break it down into amino acids. For carbohydrates, it needs to be able to break it down into individual sugar units. And finally, for fats, it needs to be able to break that fat down into glycerol and fatty acids. So I remember when I was trying to explain this to my grandmother, I actually brought out my son's Lego blocks. And I talked about how this giant Lego block is that piece of bread you just ate. But what the body needs to do is break it down into those individual components for it to actually properly absorb. Any process, oh, there I am distracted again. Any process in the body that is involved in production, storage, or the secretion of things like enzymes and digestive juices. So all of those things we need to break down our food, that's a part of assimilation. So we start to ask ourselves questions like, do I actually have adequate digestive enzymes? Is my body producing these in amounts that it needs to break down the food? What's my stomach acid like? How many people have actually heard or know that they've got low stomach acid levels? If you don't have adequate hydrochloric acid in your stomach, you can't break down food. That's the bottom line of it. Any process that makes those portions of food, so the substances more easily absorbed and transported throughout the body, also falls under the category of assimilation. So how's your liver? We don't often think about these things, but our liver is like the powerhouse organ in our body, and it holds multiple roles and huge aspects in terms of metabolic process. And so if it's not functioning well, or if we're particularly hard on our liver, then it can't actually do the job of transporting nutrients and absorbing them. Any hormonal process, and see, here's where it gets interesting too. This is more complicated than just take a probiotic and you'll feel better, right? Any neural or hormonal process that makes it easier for you to absorb food also falls under the category of assimilation. So let's talk about your insulin levels. What's your blood glucose like? If you don't eat for 5 hours, are you hangry? Right? Are you ready to like rip your spouse's head off because you haven't had enough food? We have to start thinking about these entire processes and looking at us as humans as entire beings. And so starting with, again, this building block of digestion is so really important. And I want you to think about something too, that sugar is actually one of the most addictive substances on the planet. And most of us have sugar imbalance issues. Here's where it gets complicated. There are no hormones in our body that exist in isolation. So if your blood sugar levels are out, chances are your reproductive hormones might be wonky too. I have yet to see a single person in clinic that has an isolated endocrine issue. If they've got blood sugar issues, their reproductive cycle, their menstrual cycle is not functioning properly either. They probably have emotional imbalances, like PMS symptoms, bloating, cramping, clotting, all of these types of things. And it's all connected, and it starts with digestion. So let's say you are one of those women that's suffering from a really painful menstrual cycle. The initial thought would be, well, then I need to treat with hormones, with herbs, right? Herbs that help to balance my hormones. That's what I have to do. But the number of my clients that have had symptoms like those reduce or disappear altogether because we healed their gut is mind-blowing. You wouldn't understand that. It doesn't make sense until we see ourselves as an entire holistic being. So that's why I always talk about digestion first. Now, here's something else I want to talk about too. Any human behavior that has the intent of getting food or water. So any behavior that we participate in that results in getting food or water is related to digestion. This means cooking. This means the purchasing of food, meal planning, how we eat, our mindset. What are you eating a meal while you're driving to work in the middle of traffic, super stressed out? That's going to affect your digestion. We also have a lot of behaviors around food that actually are the root causes of most of the imbalances we see in the digestive system. big one would be excessive behaviors. So this would be eating too much, eating too fast. How many people have got a 10-minute break at work and you're just wolfing down food because that's how much time you have? Also, the idea of imbalancing too much food. I'm going to say one that's probably going to trigger a few people, but caffeine consumption. It irritates the gut, right? I mean, how many people have got to use the loo after just the first couple of sips of coffee, right? So we know that impacts it. Also, toxin consumption. So this would be overconsumption of things like alcohol, cannabis. And I know that one might trigger a few people too, but in the end, cannabis is an irritant. Unfortunately, does it help a lot of people? Yes, but especially if you're combusting it, it's going to cause inflammation in the body. Seed oils, that's a new one. So these would be all of these highly processed seed oils, canola oil, sunflower oil that are in all of our foods. Rancid fats, food dyes, additives, fillers. So all of these types of things can affect the way our digestion works. And last but not least, stress. Stress impacts digestion massively, and it's an underrated one that people don't talk about. Again, you can take the best probiotics. You can eat really great food. You can start eating fermented food. But if you're constantly under stress, your digestion is never going to get the nutrients it needs to do the job. And I'm going to tell you why this is. So once again, if you've been to one of my classes, you've heard this before. But the way that our body processes stress, it doesn't matter if the stress comes because your life is imminently in danger, like you're being chased by a bear or your house is on fire or you've just been in a car accident, or if it's stress because your boss is breathing down your neck at work, your marriage is falling apart, your teenage kid hates your guts, okay? Whatever the cause of your stress might be, your body can't differentiate between the two. It treats that stress the exact same way. And so what does it do? It prioritizes bodily systems. That's what happens when our body is under stress. It says, okay, our life's in danger. So we need to prioritize oxygen absorption. We need to prioritize blood flow in the body and the musculoskeletal system, i.e., you need to be able to run away. So your heart's got to pump, you got to breathe, and you have to be able to run really fast. Digestion is not considered a high priority system. If you're being chased by a bear, your house is burning down, your body does not care if your sandwich is getting digested. So it gets put on the back burner. It's considered a secondary system. Now, if you're under long-term chronic stress for long periods of time, the whole system, your whole digestive system will never get the nutrients it needs just to do its job. It's like being understaffed at work. I need 5 people on my team to do the job and I only have 2. That's what it's like. And so when we understand the impact of stress, we start to realize why. I mean, how many people, when you're under a stressful situation, your digestion's like the first thing to go. Some people will actually feel nauseated. They have to run to the washroom. They may have loose bowel movements for days after a big presentation. This is the connection. And so here's something else to think about. We live in a world where we've normalized digestive complaints. It's normal. Oh, IBS, bloating, constipation, pain, cramping, these are all normal things. It's not normal. And so if we can get it fixed and healed, it's amazing what can happen. And when we have these symptoms, now the occasional bout of bloating and gas because you just had a really big Thanksgiving dinner and you know you ate too much is not the same thing as experiencing it every day. So I do want to make sure I distinguish that. But that's your body talking to you. That's your body saying, hey, I'm having a hard time here. I can't process the food that you're eating. So it's time that we start to listen. So foundation, pillar number 1 is digestion. We have to heal the gut. And it's sometimes really hard to convince people when they have migraines or backache from menstrual cramps or arthritis to get them to want to heal the gut. They're like, no, I have arthritis. You're not listening. And I'm like, I know, I am listening. Can we heal your gut? And the thing is North American lifestyle, we don't eat as well as we should. We're super stressed out. We're really busy. We skip meals. We're eating processed food. All of us are doing this to some extent. So all of us have compromised digestion to some extent. And even if we eat the healthiest foods. Unfortunately, when we talk about the third pillar, you'll realize that we live in a world filled with toxins. So it can also make it hard. So you always got to focus on the gut. So that's pillar number one. Any questions about pillar number one before I dive into pillar number two? So someone's commenting, so amazing. The migraine digestive connection was the first thing I understood. And think about that, right? And then you're right, connecting it then to menstrual issues. And our brain is like, well, the gut and brain are so far apart, but they're not, right? How long ago was it? About 10 or 15 years ago, modern science, they all started patting themselves on the back when they figured out that there was a connection between the gut and the brain. Interestingly enough, if you've studied plants long enough, you actually learn that most digestive plants are also nervous system plants. So it's like nature knew this long before. Humans are just catching up now. All right, so pillar number two is circulation. And the reason why this is important, so now hopefully we're at a point where we're assimilating things. We're digesting our food properly. But it's kind of like having a fancy car. You've just gotten a really good car, but if the roads you're driving on are crap, you're not really going to be able to get to where you're going, are you? And that's circulation. So we've just assimilated all of those nutrients, but if it can't get to all the parts of the body that it needs to, your liver, your kidneys, your lymphatic system, your heart, your muscles, your bones, your brain tissue, if it can't get to the places it needs to go, then it doesn't matter how fancy your car is. You got to fix the road. And that's where circulation comes in. And the thing with circulation, its job is to ensure that every single cell in our body is functioning optimally. And that means that we have to make sure that the contents of all the fluids in our body that move through, because we're mostly water, those have to be healthy and optimal as well. And the only way to do this, the only way to ensure that everything gets to where it needs to go is to move, to have things move. Now, the function of the circulatory system, first, it's to ensure that things can be added where they're needed, and also things can be taken away, i.e. toxins and waste products. It has two jobs, right? It's got to get the blood going where it needs to and the oxygen going where it needs to, but it also needs to be able to eliminate waste products. And so circulation works both ways. But what do we need circulation for? First, it participates in assimilation. Okay, so you've assimilated all these nutrients, now it needs to get places. As I mentioned just a second ago, it's necessary for the elimination of toxins and waste products. It also helps the cells from poisoning themselves because cells have debris that they need to get rid of as well, and that's a part of circulation. It's also essential in moving blood and lymphatic fluid, and it's absolutely imperative for communication between all the different organs of the body. That's something we often don't think about. Our organs don't operate independently of each other. They all rely on each other. They work together. And there are messengers, chemical messengers within the body that need to be able to move around in the systems. And if they can't do that, like let's use, say, growth hormone as an example. The anterior part of your pituitary gland sends a message that we need to produce growth hormone so our kids will grow. If that messenger can't get to the posterior part of the pituitary gland, the body will never get the message to produce the hormone in the first place. And that's just one example of how circulation works in the body. We have hormones that do all kinds of jobs, and their messages need to be able to be sent, which is why our circulation has to work. And also, circulation is vital for our immune response. Because how the heck are antibodies going to get transported anywhere if your circulation isn't working properly? So it's something to think about, right? I've just piqued some interest. Oh, hold on, circulation's related to the immune system? What's she talking about? Everything's related to everything. And when we start to heal the foundations, the basic building blocks of the human, you start to realize that you actually have a lot less to heal than you thought you did. You just needed to get the foundations working. So what happens when our circulation is compromised? First, we experience tons of inflammatory triggers in the body. Now, these triggers will vary from person to person because, hey, guess what? You guys are all individual people, and the way your body expresses inflammation will be different. But there are some basic triggers that everyone will experience. So the first will actually have a compromise in our basic cardiovascular structure. So our veins and our capillaries and arteries just won't be working the way that they should. There are some other things that trigger poor circulation too, and a big one is lack of exercise. And it's become really common because so many of our jobs, you know, if we actually look at our ancestors 100 years ago, most of their jobs involve movement of some kind. Fast forward 100 years, and most of our jobs are behind a desk. For a lot of people sitting in front of a computer, physical movement keeps our lungs healthy, keeps our heart muscles healthy, so they're strong and they can do their job. So things that are really important to think about. Movement also impacts the lymphatic system, which we'll talk about as well. So suffice it to say, circulation is foundational in treatment, because if we have compromised circulation, that means we can't assimilate food properly and we can't eliminate toxins properly. And that affects every organ in the body. So now we know we've got to fix our digestion, we've got to work on our circulation. And some of the ways that we work on circulation can be as simple as getting up and moving, walking, getting some exercise, and making sure your body actually has enough fluid. So i.e. liquid, water, right? These are really basic kind of things. So those are the first two sort of pillars when it comes to treating, you know, the human body. Any questions about circulation before I move on to pillar number 3? Just gonna scroll up. Liver is overloaded. I mean, whose isn't, right? The last 2.5 years have been really stressful. And what is a common stress response, right? Like, I will admit, I certainly drank more adult beverages in the last 2.5 years than I did ever previously. And so I think, you know, and do we eat well when we're stressed? How many people here are emotional eaters? Right? Yeah, eat your feelings, right? So like and again, we want to have, like I said, space and grace, right? Because these basic foundational pieces of information aren't taught. And so what's that saying? When you know better, you do better, right? Start making small changes. All right, so pillar number 3 is elimination or detoxification. This is the removal of anything that our body doesn't want or can't use. And most of the time it's stuff that's created within our own body, but not always. Now, there's a whole bunch of organs that are involved in the process of detoxification or elimination. And the thing is that if one of those organs, so when I say a whole bunch, we're talking about our kidneys, our liver, our lymphatic system, our circulation, our lungs, they're all responsible for the removal of waste products in some way, shape, or form. Now, if one of those systems becomes overwhelmed, overburdened, taxed, can't do its job, it starts to increase the stress load on the other symptoms. I'm going to go back to that team of 5 people, okay, that you're working with. You got a team of 5 people, and one of them's not doing their job. That means the other 4 are going to have to pick up the slack. Now, if you've got 2 that are out, the same functions in the body still have to happen, but now the other 3 have to pick up the job. You can see where I'm going with this. So what ends up happening is those other systems that may have been working well, they become overburdened and stressed out, and now they've got imbalances and they're not working. And eventually those organs become compromised. You can see the domino effect. So we say our liver is overworked. Well, when the liver can't do its job, who's picking up the slack? The kidneys, right? And then what are you going to do when your kidneys aren't working? So we have to really think about the interconnective nature of all of these different organs and systems. And of course, if those systems aren't functioning properly, the end goal is eliminating toxins or waste products. And if those systems aren't working properly, then you're not going to be eliminating toxins and waste products like you should be. So this is why it's an absolute cornerstone, or what I consider to be pivotal and foundational in terms of healing. And when our toxins and waste products in the body become too high, our body can't function properly. Our cells themselves can't function properly. And now I can hear some voices in my head because I've heard this. Well, our body's designed to do this naturally, isn't it? Like, I've heard a lot of people, there's a big anti-detox movement. There's a big one, right? You don't need to detox. Our body can do this naturally. This is an argument I hear all the time. And in a perfect world, it's absolutely true. But we don't live in a perfect world. Our organs are designed to handle a certain load of toxins. But the problem is that our system is bombarded on a daily basis. Let's look at our food. Now, I don't know where everybody stands, but we start looking at things like genetically modified food. And is that food more difficult to digest? I often have a bit of a working theory that, is gluten the issue? For some people it is. Don't get me wrong, there are people with celiac. But is it the hybridization and the genetic modification of the grains that's actually making it harder to digest? They do things like they actually make wheat so that it's shorter, so it won't break off in wind. What's the implications in gluten content or the ability for it to be digested if we start tinkering with the genome, right? Not to mention sprays and chemicals that are ubiquitous in most of our foods. We also have highly processed foods with a lot of ingredients and, like I said, food dyes and things that cause inflammation in the body. And then, of course, the aforementioned seed oils and rancid oils. So what I mean by rancid is that they're actually using cooking oils and fats that have already gone bad. And we know they're oxidized. Everybody's heard about oxidative damage in cells, right? If the ingredients in our food are already oxidized and rancid, what's it doing to our body? And then we can talk about personal care products. This was an eye opener when we talked about this in Weavers. I actually had them play a bingo game and to go through their house to find all the products that had all the hinky ingredients. And they were like, no, it's in everything, right? They're filled with irritants, they're filled with toxins. Many of them disturb the microflora. So we're using things like body washes and soaps that are actually stripping our skin of beneficial bacteria that we need to do certain jobs. Some of our personal care products will actually prevent our body from eliminating. Antiperspirant would be one of them. Sweating is a mode of elimination, and we're using a product that actually stops that process. So what's that long-term impact of that? And then, of course, gosh, then we get into air pollution and off-gassing and all this kind of stuff. Never mind heavy metals, medications, all the things that we're exposed to. So yes, in a perfect world, if you lived in a cabin in the middle of the woods and drank beautiful spring water and nothing but organic food and never had stress ever, your body could probably detox on its own just fine. But sometimes it needs a little bit of help. So you start to get the picture that because our body is overloaded, we may need to support these organs of elimination so that they're optimally able to do their job. Now, don't get me wrong, the human body is resilient and it's strong. It absolutely can withstand bursts of high stress situations. It can. If it couldn't, I mean, let's be honest, humans would have died out a really long time ago. But the constant bombardment, sometimes it needs a little bit of support. So how exactly does our body eliminate? Well, the first goal is to get the toxins out of the tissues in the first place. And it does this by two ways. It draws the toxins either into the blood or into the lymphatic fluid. And then usually those toxins then get moved to organs that facilitate the actual elimination. Now, some will move through the lymph nodes and will be removed that way, i.e. sweating. But most toxins have to be processed by another organ, usually the kidneys or the liver. So water-soluble toxins are going to go to the kidneys, and some of it will, again, come out through sweat. Fat-soluble toxins, on the other hand, they make their way to the liver. Now, the first thing that the liver tries to do, which is really fascinating, is it takes that fat-soluble toxin and it tries to make it water soluble. And it's got a whole bunch of really neat ways that it does that. And if this is something you're super interested in, I highly recommend checking out the detox module if you ever decide to join Weavers, because we went into the nitty-gritty of how the liver worked. But it's going to try to convert it into water soluble toxins. And if it can't do that, then it dumps it into your bile. Okay. Now, a lot of that bile will be removed through bowel movements. So I want you to ask yourself, how many bowel movements are you having a day? You don't have to tell me. You're welcome to type it if you want. Remember that person who lives up in the woods, in the mountain with no stress and everything's fabulous? They're having as many bowel movements as they're having meals. It's eye-opening, isn't it? In a perfectly functioning human system, you are having as many bowel movements as you do meals, and healthy bowel movements. So for me, from a clinical perspective, if my client is not having at least one bowel movement a day, they're constipated, which can be eye-opening. I remember when I told my mother-in-law the first time, she was like, that's not possible. And I was like, I'm really sorry, but it is. She's like, but it's like every 3 days for me. And I was like, oh, right. And I tried, I was like, so much compassion, right? Drink some more water, but that is the fact of the matter. Now, here's something that's really interesting. So if you fall towards that more constipated side of things, what's happening when all that waste is just sitting in your colon? I can tell you what's happening. It's reabsorbing bile. And while it's reabsorbing bile, it's reabsorbing toxins, because where water flows, so do toxins. And so this is actually kind of an inefficient system, but it's the system that we have, right? It actually makes the elimination of fat soluble toxins, like I said, not very efficient. And what's even worse is most of our endocrine disrupting toxins, those ones that we're a little concerned about, most of them are fat soluble. Kind of sucks, doesn't it? So we really have to start thinking about these kinds of things when we're thinking about how the body works. All right, so this may be getting into, okay, so yeah, so grazing. So grazing is an interesting one. There's some schools of thought around grazing. So the first place my body or my mind goes is, if we have to graze, what's your blood sugar levels like? Because your body, your digestive system needs some bounce back time so it can replenish things like digestive enzymes and hydrochloric acid. So if you're constantly eating, it never really has enough time to replenish those basic enzymes and nutrients it needs just to be able to break down the food. Now, I'm convinced this is different for kids because my son's hungry every 15 minutes. So I don't know. I'm convinced their system somehow works differently. And again, you have to do exactly what you're saying. You've got to do what works best and listen to your body and listen to the emotional symptoms that are coming around eating too. Are you grazing because you're bored? Is it boredom eating? Are you grazing because it's emotional eating? Or are you grazing because I might kill someone because my blood sugar just dropped, right? So you have to look at those reasons, but it's really interesting to me. Yeah, absolutely. So someone was saying, they have one bowel movement a day, which, if I'm seeing that, awesome, let's get it up to 2, unless it's super inconvenient. For some people, it's inconvenient, right? Like my brother works up on cell phone towers. He's like, girl, I can't poop more than once a day. Like I'm up 500 feet on a tower, and I'm like, fair enough. And they're saying, I was talking to a friend who said 2 a week and needs caffeine to be able to facilitate that process. There's definitely digestive issues, but I also want to drop this information in. Is it emotional too? How many of us suck our gut in? How many of us hold our breath? Sometimes we just aren't getting enough oxygen in the system either, because the constant holding in of our gut can also cause constriction in the bowels too. So something to think about. Like, I'm really sorry if there's a lot of Spanx wearers out here, but all that underwear that makes things all constricted and tight, I'm convinced that's contributing to digestive issues as well. So we've talked about digestion, we've talked about circulation, and now, of course, we've talked about elimination. So what's the last pillar? The last pillar would be, what's the best way? Integration, communication is a really good way to look at it. So I want you to think about the fact that we are a multicellular organism. We're not like an amoeba here, right? Like we got a lot of complex systems going on, which means that we need to have the ability for all of those systems to coordinate, right? Because we're complex. Again, none of these things exist in isolation to the other. The liver just doesn't sit there minding the liver's business, right? It interacts and communicates with so many other systems. It's like a when it's working right, a well-oiled machine that communicates well with all the other systems in the body. And so we have processes in our body that allow us, the organism, to be able to integrate information and to coordinate functions. Does anyone have that role at work? You're the one that delegates, right? You're the one that divides up the roles at work and tells your team members what to do. Well, we have systems like that in our body that happen all the time. And actually, it's happening constantly. It's happening right now while you're sitting and listening to me talk. But here's where it's even more complicated. These systems need to be able to adapt to an ever-changing and ever-shifting environment, because they don't exist in a vacuum, right? They're not coordinating in what we would call like a static state. So these systems, they need to be able to integrate and communicate information, but also adapt the minute something shifts and changes in our system. So, you know, they've got pretty important jobs too. So here is an example, and I used this before. How you digest your food will be very different if you're on the 401 in traffic, inhaling something you just picked up at the rest stop, versus sitting at a relaxing dinner with a really good friend. How your body functions and digests in those two different situations, the body needs to be able to adapt and coordinate those because it's not working in the same way. So we kind of have two major control systems in the body. The first would be something like what we would call instantaneous. This is, you know, when we burn ourselves, ow, and you take your hand off, right? The shift happens instantaneously. But we also have long-term control functions, and these systems work more with the rhythms of our body, because we are actually very rhythmical in nature, because we are controlled by things like sunlight, day and night. We're controlled by seasonal cycles. I wouldn't say controlled, influenced by seasonal cycles, moon cycles. I mean, how many people here, your menstrual cycle is synced up with the moon cycles? Now, again, in a perfect world, that person who's living up in the woods in their cabin, you know, they would likely have a menstrual cycle that would be perfectly in time with the moon cycles. And so we sort of have these two different coordinating systems in the body. Now, the main control, the main coordinator is our brain. And our brain carries out its roles through our nervous system, peripheral, our nerves, and hormones. This is how it controls most of the functions in the body. So nervous system, hey brain, lift my arm, okay? That's nervous system. And if your nervous system isn't functioning properly, sometimes those messages aren't getting to where they need to go. The hormonal system is slower. So that is, hey body, we need to produce more insulin, or our serotonin levels aren't where they should be, or we need to produce melatonin because it's dark outside, right? So those systems tend to be a little slower than the instantaneous, hey, lift your arm. Now, I want you to remember that the brain is not a dictator. So while it is sort of the main operating system that controls most of the functions in the body, it's not a dictator. So there is a connection between the brain and the actual processes that the brain controls, i.e. the nervous system and the endocrine system. So it's a give and take relationship. They're constantly flowing information back and forth to each other. There's a feedback mechanism. If something's not working right in the endocrine system, it sends a message to the brain, and then vice versa. Which means that if either one of those processes is out of whack, then it affects everything in the body. So this is why integration is so important. And this is why I always look at nervous system health and endocrine health when it comes to my clients, after we've addressed the other pillars, of course. So just in brief review, we're going to talk about the cornerstones again. So first is assimilation. That's our digestive processes, but also anything revolving around the assimilation of nutrients. So remember, that's the state in which you eat. That is how you eat, how slowly, how quickly, all of those things. The next would be circulation, right? We've assimilated all of those great nutrients, but now we need to actually get them to places in the body appropriately. Then it's elimination. How do we eliminate waste products? How do we make sure the body is taking care of itself in that way? And finally, how are all of these systems working together harmoniously? And so generally, as a practitioner, and if you were to say, embark on your own healing journey, we would usually tackle those in that order. We start with the gut. And as disconnected as it may feel from the symptoms you're currently experiencing, if you heal the gut, I guarantee you will get some improvement on your symptoms, even if they don't seem connected. I remember a client recently, had a lot of menstrual irregularity, cramping, pain, clotting, all of those types of things. And we started with the gut. And I tell my clients that that's what we're doing. And she was pretty resistant. And after 4 weeks on a formula, she's like, it's not 100% better, but I'm definitely seeing improvement. I'm like, I know, right? So we heal that gut first, then we focus on circulation, elimination, and finally integration. And so what's really interesting is if those 4 pillars, if those foundational systems are working the way that they're designed to work, I very rarely actually have to treat specific symptoms. Somewhere along the way, through healing those systems and allowing them to work optimally, healing occurs. So I am going to open it up to any questions people might have at this particular point, because that is, in a nutshell, the foundations of healing. So you're welcome to unmute yourself. Remember, we are being recorded, so if you unmute yourself, you will be on camera. If that is not something that feels comfortable to you, you are welcome to type in the chat. All right. So tips to eliminate lymph garbage from the body for youth and adults. So, as I just mentioned, make sure that the other 2 systems are working well. So that's a really big component, making sure that digestion's working well and circulation's working well. In terms of lymph, and I can only make general recommendations. So like I say, we'll call them tips. Nothing I am saying here should be interpreted as medical advice. Just follow up with your healthcare practitioner of choice. But I really like dry brushing. Big fan of dry brushing. It really helps to get lymphatic fluid moving. I'm a big fan of exercise, because here's the thing about the lymphatic system. So our cardiovascular system has a pump. It has a heart, right? It can pump blood everywhere. Our lymphatic system doesn't have a pump. It relies on physical movement. And so restrictive undergarments, sedentary lifestyles, and then of course pile in things like toxins, and our lymph just can't move. So dry brushing, okay, I'll answer that question in just a second, Lisa. Yes. So dry brushing can help. Yeah, okay, like Gentiana is saying, shake machine, get on the trampoline. I love bouncing on the trampoline with my kid. These are great ways to get things moving. If I may be so bold, the first thing that should be coming off when you get home is not your shoes, it should be your bra, okay? Like if I can be, right? It's so, unless you've got one of those ones that isn't quite so restrictive, doesn't have underwire, but it really does restrict lymphatic movement, ensuring your body has enough water. Okay, so here's the calculation for water. How much do you weigh in pounds? Divide that in half. That's how many ounces you should be drinking. That's mind-blowing, isn't it? And here's where it gets even more complicated. If you're consuming beverages that would be irritants to the kidney or diuretics like coffee, you then have to add in 1 extra glass of water for every cup of coffee you're having. So make sure your body actually has enough fluid so they can move fluids around. And lastly, I would really look at your personal care products. And are there any personal care products that are potentially contributing to toxicity or impacting the lymphatic system? Big proponent for switching to deodorant as opposed to antiperspirant, all of these things. So in combination, all of that, and hopefully that answers your question. The follow-up question was, does dry brushing help with circulation? Not if you're doing dry brushing properly. So if you're doing dry brushing properly, you're only doing a gentle touch on the skin. If anyone's ever had a lymphatic massage before, you probably spent the first 5 minutes going, am I actually paying for this? Because there's not a lot of pressure, right? And that's because, oh, what did someone say in Weavers? It's like the amount of pressure it would take to move a dime across your skin is the amount of pressure you need to stimulate the lymphatic system. So our circulatory system is much deeper than our lymphatic system. So circulation, again, exercise, really, really important, is a big one for that movement. And sometimes things like restrictive undergarments, but the weight of a nickel. Okay, good. All right, so another question. Would the 4 pillars help the stiffness in wrist and knees? If where your body accumulates inflammation is in the joints, then absolutely it will, because if we address healing, baseline inflammation levels go down. So there's something I do want to mention, is that we have to also address the things that were causing the inflammation, the imbalance, and the disease in the first place. So if you figure out through this process that your body just can't handle soy, or it can't handle wheat, or it can't handle dairy, you've got to be pretty diligent at reducing those things or eliminating them from your diet in the first place, and that will start to help reduce inflammation levels. Yeah. All right, any other questions? I just saw your follow-up comment to the trampoline. Gee, that's funny. Yes, mind the boobs on the trampoline for sure. So the question is, will there be a replay? So of course, this is being recorded. If you are in Weavers of Plant Wisdom, which is my monthly membership platform, this will be uploaded into your masterclass library probably tonight. So you guys will have access to it. I am currently debating how I'm going to offer this up. It's not going away, that's for sure. But I think it's going to be an evergreen webinar that you can just go in through my website, sign up to watch it again, and then you'll have access to watching it. I may put it up on YouTube as well. We'll see. We'll see. But yes, you will have a way of being able to access this recording. So I did want to take, I will check questions too, but I did want to take just a quick few. Oh, we have one question. This was directed to me. Friend has celiac. Her gut is in bad shape, affecting all other symptoms. What can she do? So again, I cannot do specific advice for conditions. It is challenging navigating Health Canada's rules. I actually just said this in my most recent video. I can tell you what herbs help fever, but I can't tell you how to take them. And so I can speak generally. If they have celiac, you definitely have to absolutely, if you've got celiac, you can't have any gluten, and you've got to be so careful. Start reading those ingredients, look at boxes, make sure it's not sneaking in somewhere, ensuring your oats are also prepared in a gluten-free facility, listening to your body. And then I would start, again, working on healing digestion. So looking at herbs that help to support and heal the gut, looking at things like fermented foods, if the body tolerates them well. Not everybody tolerates fermented foods. Start looking at things like reducing stress levels to help nourish and support the nervous system. These are all really important. You can look at probiotics, all of those types of things. And it's possible. Now, a lot of this, you guys, you can do on your own. And that is one of the things that I really teach in Weavers, is to empower people to heal themselves, right? Not everybody has the time, inclination, or money to go and see practitioners. But if you can start to learn how to support your body and your families and friends' bodies, it can be really, really helpful. So the big thing, avoid the gluten. There's no cheating in that one if you have celiac, unfortunately. And then just start putting in some really good foundational digestive processes. Tincture 9 herbs. Awesome. All right, so I'm just going to share my screen because I do want to take a quick opportunity just to discuss Weavers of Plant Wisdom with you folks, because the doors are open. So if you like my teaching style, if you want to learn more, if you're interested in healing in this particular way, perhaps it's something that will be of interest to you. So how Weavers of Plant Wisdom works is they are video-based lessons. I teach live once a week. And there is always recording. So there's lots of my students that have never been to a single live class, because the minute it's done recording, it gets uploaded and it's a part of your library. And it's there for you to experience and watch as many times as you want, as long as you're a member of Weavers. We usually have monthly focus topics. As soon as you join, you get access to all of the previous material. And I've been doing this since I think February. So there is a lot of really good stuff on there already. I try to do monthly Q&As, and that's when all questions are on the table. And because everybody knows I'm into fermenting, canning, homesteading, herbal medicine, natural health, I mean, all questions are on the table. And it's a curriculum that I really do sincerely believe helps to support all aspects of you, because I also believe we're multidimensional, meaning that, you know, we talk about how to support the body through flower essences and heal that way. We talk about how to deal with conflict and how to deal with energetic situations. So it really does focus on all of those things. And so who do I think personally it's for? I think it's for people who want to cultivate a deeper connection. They want to learn from the land, foster self-sufficiency. I think this is often undervalued. Self-sufficiency isn't just being able to, you know, collect your own rainwater and produce your own energy and grow your own food. It also helps to be able to heal yourself too. And also for folks who are interested into really stepping into holistic health and learning about those modalities. So in previous months, we have an entire module on the digestive system, and it's awesome. We have an entire module on the detoxification system, and I go into anatomy and physiology, as well as how to use herbs, supplements, and other complementary therapeutic techniques that you can incorporate into your lifestyle. So it's not just looking at herbs. We have talked about philosophies in healing and health, how to get past plateaus, and we probably have at least a dozen specific herbal monograph classes that we've already done. And every single one of them has a handout. So you've got, like, ask any of the weavers that are here tonight. They probably have a kick-ass binder already going that has more information than you could possibly imagine. So in terms of cost, I know this is a big one. I am offering a discount right now. You just need to use the coupon code that's pictured. So it's $27 a month, and that's Canadian. So if you are American, this is a very good price. And if you use the coupon code there, that price stays the same. It stays the same for as long as you're a member. So it's not just like 1 month you're getting that price for. So that is WPW25 off, OFF. And yeah, and don't forget to use the coupon code if you do decide to sign up. I will drop the link in the chat for anyone who's interested, or feel free to email me if you've got more questions. I think that is, oh, and what do we have coming up? So right now we are tackling the immune system. So you would have only missed one class where we talked about the anatomy and physiology of the immune system specifically. We're doing lymphatic system next. We're going to be diving into how to actually build your home apothecary. We're going to have classes on how to formulate and combine herbs so you can actually, you know, experience herbal medicine like a pro, you know, for lack of a better word. We're going to talk about things like how to incorporate herbs into a spiritual practice. And once gardening season kicks up, we're going to start talking about how to grow herbs, what plants we should grow, and why. So I will leave it at that. This is not my strong suit in terms of sharing this kind of information, but I really am very, very passionate about sharing this knowledge. I really believe that herbal medicine is something that everyone should be able to access if they so choose. And I love to teach. So I will very quickly just drop the link in there. And again, if anyone has questions, please reach out. And I'm sure everyone here can see the comments. There are a few weavers in the class here tonight that joined us. Send it to everyone. So there is the link there. Oh yeah, that's true. You do get full access to me too. There's even a weaver specific Facebook chat. So, and I answer questions really, really quickly. And we do have a specific Facebook group too, where everybody can post their questions and get answers right away. We practice formulating and we do all kinds of really fun stuff. So if there are no further questions for the class this evening, I will thank you all so very much for joining me on learning about the foundations and the pillars of your health. I hope you found just a few nuggets that might even just provide a key to what your next step is so that you can step into health, vitality, and to start feeling awesome, right? That is my ultimate goal. Is I want everybody here to, I don't want everybody to survive. I want you all to thrive, and I want you to live the most beautiful, fullest, and I don't know, soulful and joyful life that you absolutely can. So thank you for joining me. And I will hopefully see you in the next class.